about us, and it's time to bow down. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Bow Down. I am so excited for today's episode. Dennis, as always, it's lovely to see you, and I'm excited to get into this.
You are looking positively radiant today, Reese.
Thank you.
And I love it. I love it. What does your shirt say for the?
It says aperitivo. I'm wearing my Italian t-shirt today.
That's so awesome. It looks beautiful. You look beautiful. It's great
Thank you.
to be here. So today I'm excited. So our last episode, you shared with me a lot about my my natal chart and my and everything really proved to be quite powerful for me, very resonant and very aligned with how I see myself, and it explains some things. And so I'm still processing really how to use that in my life, and so I wanted to return the favor as we promised. And so today we're here to walk through your human design. And I'm really excited to share with you what I found. I'm curious what resonates and what you'll take away, and see how that goes. So how does that sound?
I'm
you still up for it?
absolutely thrilled for it. I have a little bit of insight on my human design, but not much. You're certainly much more well versed in that world, and I'm just excited. I think any opportunity to, know thyself is. I'm always hungry for more information about me and ways that I can step more fully into my truth and use that to serve and make the world a better place. So I cannot wait. I do have my chart up on my side just so that,
Awesome.
I can reference stuff, but I'll hand it over to you, whatever you feel is the best place to get started. I'm so excited to hear.
Cool. So it doesn't surprise me what you just said, based on this idea of always looking for more, information, more knowledge. That as you'll see as we get there, that makes absolutely perfect sense, and wouldn't really be any other way according to your design. So just maybe it'd be worthwhile to just take 2 or 3 minutes to just ground our listeners in terms of what human design is without going into it. So
Yeah,
tons of
absolutely.
resources. We will put in a bunch of links, and as Reese did last week, I do want to stress that I don't consider myself a professional in this. I hope to be. I'm working at it, and so this is practice for me. But I don't consider myself yet well enough. I consider myself well versed enough to be a little dangerous. But looking forward to really diving in more deeply to this, because I do think it's transformative. But the 10,000 foot view, human design was created in the late 80s. It basically leverages sort of an engineering mindset, so sort of with a philosophical mindset, with an esoteric. It leverages the I Ching and other aspects of philosophy and sort of spirituality. It also does use the positions of the planets, and the moon and so forth, to determine your chart to begin with. So there is definitely some overlap with astrology, I would say, in terms of at least in the creation of it. And there's also the belief that the current configuration of the stars as we go through cycles does impact how you function, as how you operate at any given time sphere. So there are some parallels. It is about 60 times less popular than astrology, judging from the subscriptions on the Reddit, the appropriate subreddits. So there's roughly 2 million people who have subscribed to the astrology subreddit, and just in the tens of thousands who've subscribed to human design. But to me, it is a little. I like human design. It resonates more strongly with me than astrology. It's not to say it's better or worse. It just resonates more with my logical, sort of technical mindset, which is interesting because there's a fair bit of woo-woo in this as well. So to suggest somehow that this is scientific fact, it would be disingenuous. And again, it goes back to what I think we maybe mentioned last week, that it's not really about is this true as much as it is it useful.
Yeah.
And so I would say that to everybody listening, human design, try it for yourself. Like, don't believe me. This is not a religion. This is not a belief system. This is not any of this. It's an empirical system that you can try. And either it works or it doesn't work. And so I encourage you to try it and see
Yeah.
how it helps
One
or not.
One thing I want to throw out there too, just in terms of like my worldview with stuff like this, because I think oftentimes it's like people adopt certain things and it's like, well, I am an astrology person and that's going to be the thing that I build everything on. I really love the practice of layering all of these together and using them within your own worldview. And I think knowing that, like, we've talked about biblical womanhood and Christianity a lot, there is nothing about astrology or human design or tarot or any other of these metaphysical practices that stands in contradiction to believing in a higher power or any religion. And yeah, so I guess I thought I'd emphasize that too for our listeners, that even as you experiment, if you're like, oh, but it stands in contradiction to my belief system, it may not. Is there a way to make it work? And I think layering it actually brings a lot of its own unique magic. So I'm excited to learn even more about it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I would say even, and maybe other listeners, particularly if they have deconstructed, or maybe they're deconstructing their Christianity or whatever belief system maybe they started with. I know when I was heavily into the church and sort of conditioned by the church, I would never have. I would have thought looking at something like this was demonic in some senses, or wrong to do. And I actually, coming out on the other side of it, I understand where that feeling comes from. But I would just say I almost think it's easier to try this if you are a Christian or you do have a belief in a God, whether it's the Christian God, Judeo-Christian God, or some other, whatever the case is, because if you can believe that yes, there is a God, there is a creator, then how is it so hard to believe that not only is there a creator, but he's so good, he has a design manual that he's created for you. So
Yeah.
I don't think being Christian or believing in a higher power, I actually think that this makes it more relevant in some sense.
Yeah.
Because if you were purely scientific, purely materialistic, then it would be very hard perhaps to swallow this in terms of, oh, could this possibly be true? So just want to throw that out there for any listeners. I do think it is compatible and in some cases would work hand in hand with a Christian mindset, particularly around areas of prayer or meditation or things you want to focus on in your walk, and bring who you are and understand who you are better, so you better understand your spirituality, whatever that is.
Yeah.
So I definitely, I'm very passionate about this. I hope that comes through to our listeners. And so yeah, with that, let's go ahead and get started. So
Amazing.
we will go through about, I don't know, we'll see how much time we have. I'm going to try to
Sure.
sort of go from the most important to the least important. I will say, like, literally, I think we could take 8 hours to go through this. I mean, there's a lot of, this is a 48-ounce prime rib that we're looking at. This is definitely like a lot here. And so I'm really going to try to focus on the big picture, and maybe with a couple of interesting highlights, but there's a lot more here, and obviously you've looked at your chart before, so you have a stepping off point. But my hope is that this may show you some other areas you might want to take a look at.
Totally. I'm excited.
Awesome. All right, so let's start. So the first thing, so 80%. So for the listeners, there's a lot. I mean, you can go down to the minutia, but I would say 80-20, because I'm a big fan of the Pareto principle in terms of 80-20. So what is the 80%? And it comes down to two words, and it's strategy and authority. So, and that's what we'll start with, which is our type. So there are 4 or 5, depending on how you want to call it, main types of humans according to human design. And each of these types has a different strategy for dealing with the world. And I think an analogy that might be useful for listeners would be that of different types of vehicles. So I want you to imagine a bicycle, a car, a submarine, and a rocket ship. These are four very different types of vehicles. And one is not necessarily better than the other. So there may be times when a bicycle is, if you're in a city with traffic's at a deadlock, a bicycle may be the best way to get around. If you need to go underwater, the other three probably aren't going to help you. And if you're in outer space, so each of these vehicles, if you will, these types, is not better or worse or luckier or less lucky than any of the others. They're just different vehicles. And in the same way that you would not take a submarine and put it in outer space and expect it to perform, or take a car and drive it on the bottom of the ocean and expect it to work, we are the same way. We have a specific type that is our way of processing, of working with the world. And human design basically says that everything in life is us making decisions. So every single moment of every single day, we're making decisions, whether we think we are or not. Most of them happen subconsciously. What am I going to have for breakfast? What time am I going to wake up? So life is just this fundamental set of decisions that we make, one after the other after the other. And oftentimes we make decisions in a way that is not according to how we are designed to make decisions. And so as a result, we make often decisions that are not optimal for us. And then we have more stress, we have more frustration, we have more angst. We're not living life in the flow that we would want to. And so what I would suggest is the more you can learn about yourself, so know thyself, the more you can understand how you operate, the more you can get into the flow of life and make these decisions in a manner that is not in your mind, but is according to your type. And so you get more into a flow. And so, if nothing more, knowing your strategy and knowing which is how do you make decisions, and then knowing your authority, which is how do you make those decisions, and what do you rely on in terms of making those decisions. So the strategy and authority are the two most fundamental things. So we will spend our time most of the time speaking about that, because if you live your strategy and live in your authority, that is 80% of the battle. Not all of it, but it will make a huge difference in your life. And then once you've seen that difference, then it may encourage you to go a little bit further and see how else can you use this. But so I would start there. So for you, your type, so there are 4 types, 5 depending. So they are the generator, the projector type, the manifestor type, and the reflector type. Now, you'll sometimes hear 5 because generators are broken out actually into 2 categories. There's a pure generator, and then there's a manifesting generator. And there's always argument. How do you keep them separate? Do you not? Both are fundamentally generators. The main difference is the manifesting generator is kind of a bit of a hybrid of a manifestor and a generator. And again, this is not a talk about all the different types. So that is something that if there's interest, we could always talk more about. But that we can put up links here as well for folks to explore. There's places where you can get your own chart for free. And we'll definitely link that up as well so you can understand. But suffice it to say, generators, about 70% of the world is either a generator or a manifesting generator. And you are a generator. You are a pure generator, actually. What does that mean? Well, that means you are naturally equipped or designed with a robust, sustainable life force energy that allows you to deeply engage with whatever tasks and projects that you want to. Generators are the only type who has this robust, sustainable life force energy. Whether you're a manifesting generator or just a pure generator, you have essentially an unlimited supply of energy. Your optimal way of interacting with life is through responding rather than initiating. And that is a key thing. Only manifestors are living according to their design when they initiate things. So your strategy, the words that I would tattoo upon your skull kind of thing is your strategy is always to respond. You are not supposed to initiate things. You may initiate things, but only in response to something else. And in fact, because you're a pure generator type, your optimal way is through response rather than initiating. The second piece is and your, which we'll get to, is your authority, which is a sacral authority. So I think in the past we may have talked a little bit. I may have misspoken, but in when we had talked in the past. But your authority is sacral, which is essentially a gut yes no response. And that response is everything in life, every decision in life should go through that gut response. And the thing with the gut, the sacral, is it can only answer yes or no questions. It can only answer binary questions. The sacral, your gut, can't answer, what do I want for dinner? It can answer, do I want Chinese? Do I want to go out? Do I want to stay home? Do I want to DoorDash? Do I want pizza? Yes or no? It can feel that. But if it's like, what do you want to eat? That it's silent because it doesn't have an answer for you because it can only process yes or no. Typically, it may feel like an uh-huh or an just sort of this little, and you have to listen for it, but it comes from your gut, not from your head. And this yes or no response is very powerful because it's what's going to drive you towards satisfaction and away from frustration. And so as a generator, so you know how in a car, right, there's a check engine light, right? It'll come on, and it could be for 100 different reasons, right? But you see this light come on. What does it tell you? It says, well, check the fucking engine, right? I mean,
right.
I don't know what's wrong. It doesn't tell you there's 100 engine codes or 150 engine codes. But take it, figure it out. Take it to somebody who knows. Notice it essentially, and do so, and pay attention to it. Is what I would say. I mean, now I know a lot of us probably ignore the check engine light. I know I have been guilty of that. But your check engine light, Reese, is always going to be frustration. So when you feel frustration, that means that's your check engine light from an emotional perspective or from a feeling perspective is if you are feeling frustrated, that is your signal that something there's some aspect of your life, typically maybe what you're feeling frustrated about, but things can bleed over too.
Right.
We're complex human beings. But if you're feeling frustration, there's an aspect of your life where you're likely not living according to your design. And so it's not to judge that. I mean, we all don't live according. Nobody lives according to the design 24/7, and it is a practice. But when you feel frustration, it is a clear-cut signal to you to check what's going on. It's a check engine light, check frustration light. What is the frustration? So what are some of? So let me stop there first of all. Does any questions about that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. It totally does. And I think last week before we hit record on discussing your birth chart, we were talking a little bit about this recent decision I made to move back to the States. And I think so often I will second guess these gut feelings, right? This and feeling, because when I get a really strong one, it's like it's overwhelming and I've got clarity, and it is the frustration makes a lot of sense because I've talked a little bit before about how anger is not an easy emotion for me to tap into. And I think that there is this feeling though of like, well, when something's wrong, it's like, I'm not mad at anything or at the situation or at myself. I'm frustrated at the lack of flow. It's like, something isn't right. There's friction. So no, it absolutely makes sense. Yeah, no, I don't think any questions. Of course, I have some thoughts also rolling, but I don't want to, I have a feeling some may be answered as you go.
Okay.
So
well, if not, we'll definitely please do ask. So yeah, I mean, that is something that is so critical for you, what you just said. So your authority, your decision-making authority is your sacral. That's your inner authority. And that means your decisions are guided, or should be, when you're operating according to design, your decisions are guided by immediate visceral gut responses. Strong gut responses. Now, unlike an emotional being, someone who has an emotional authority, which is like me, um, your sacral, you don't need to ride the waves of emotion. Actually, your gut response penetrates through that. You don't have to ride the waves of emotion to come up with a decision. Your sacral, you can trust that. Whereas somebody who has an emotional authority actually needs to wait. When you get that gut response, Reese, similar to how we talked about with your last week or so, when you hit that gut response, you disregard it at your own peril. Don't
Yeah.
allow, don't, if you let your mind make the decision instead of your gut, that way be dragons, essentially. That's where you're going to operate outside of your decision-making authority. And when you're operating outside of your authority, you have no faith in the outcome of your decisions because you're operating outside of the authority that you're given from an energetic or an auric perspective. So what are some other traits? I mean, number one, you have a steady and sustainable energy, which is wonderful. It serves you exceptionally well, especially in what you're doing, managing multiple demands. Trying to balance, the community, trying to balance, your robust podcasting, writing, all of the different things that you're trying to do or that you're working on that feel right for you. The key thing here, though, is that energy, as much as possible, needs to be directed at tasks that feel energizing rather than draining. And the fact that, and again, this is where that frustration will come up. So you mentioned anger is not your signature emotion as a generator. It is, in fact, frustration. Is not. That's not to say you're never going to feel anger. I mean,
Right.
we're human. But that anger is there. It's a byproduct, and it can be an unpleasant emotion to have to handle. But it's not really your signature emotion, which is going to be frustration more than anything. Now, that frustration, can it lead to anger? Absolutely. I mean, and all sorts of other things. But that frustration really is your key. You are designed to work your butt off and then go to sleep. Like that is really generators' purpose, is to work really hard and put everything into something they love, ideally, and then go to bed like at night. And that is truly when they do that, when it's really something that is optimal for them, they're doing their purpose, they're fulfilling their purpose, they don't get tired. And because you are a generator, you regenerate every morning. Your sacral center regenerates the energy. And so every morning you start with a fresh slate, versus other types who don't have that renewable energy and need to be much more careful about their energy. Now, you have so much energy, but you do need to be careful, again, about using it in the right places, because when you don't, that's what leads to burnout. When you're doing things that your mind tells you need to do, you need to add, but your gut is pushing, you're struggling with it, you're procrastinating with it, you need to explore why. Why am I procrastinating this? Is this not for me? And take time to sit with it. Why, because is it something you have to do? Do you really have to do it? Again, the clear gut responses. To me, no matter what the decision is, you need to find that internal clarity into some, you need to tune into that immediate physical response. That clear or and let it guide you towards the decisions that are aligned with your authentic self. And as a practice, notice when you're making decisions and track the decisions. Are you making this decision from your gut? Are you really listening to your gut, or is this a head decision? And the bigger the decision, obviously, the more weight you want to put on the gut. But ideally, every decision, big or small, you're spending time, listening to your gut. And then lastly, again, and I think I've touched on this, is meaningful work. For you especially, you gain deep, deep satisfaction when you're engaging in activities that you genuinely enjoy. And so prioritizing tasks that resonate with your passion and interests is going to skyrocket your overall satisfaction and, by the way, how effective you are. When you're doing something you love and are passionate about, that's when you have that flow. You said flow. You get frustrated when there's not flow. Well, when there's not flow, ask yourself, where is this not flow coming from? Chances are it's coming from the not self. Um, Decision making, again, that's your sacral. So what are some common pitfalls? So, and we'll talk there, and then would definitely love your thoughts. So number one is, and I think we almost talked about this before we came on today, but is this feeling or need, perhaps to overcommit, to being, you may feel pressured by others, or maybe you feel a responsibility. Well, I said I was going to do this, I have to do this. And so this pressure comes in, and the solution to that is not necessarily to do it or to not do it. Again, you have to make those decisions, and I'm not, there's things we have to do, and or we feel we have to do them. I'm not sure we actually do, but if
Right.
what I'd recommend is practice pausing to check your gut response before immediately saying yes. So a phrase you might want to memorize, or just practice asking yourself this over and maybe you do this already, but let me check in with myself and get back to you. As a way, somebody asks you to do something, rather than immediately saying yes. Now, unless your sacral is strong, you may, again, unlike emotional beings who who have an emotional authority, who would need to ride the wave of emotion. So a friend asks you to do a podcast, you're immediately like, oh, hell yeah. Um, Now, as an emotional being, you would wait to make sure that that's how you felt. It might be an hour, it might be a day. For you, though, when you feel that clear yes in your gut, you can trust that, because you have an undefined, and we'll get to this, but an undefined solar plexus, which means your emotion is not your authority. So you don't need to wait for emotional waves to pass, like an emotional authority, somebody who has an emotional authority do. That signal from your gut is that ping is what it is, and it's not going to change. Like that, you can trust that sacral yes or no. And then the second thing, and I don't know, I don't know that we've ever specifically talked about this, but I'm curious how it lands. Is ignoring these gut its instincts due to either your own or somebody else's expectation, or really just your mind, your sort of logical reasoning kind of coming in, and so you do something because your mind just is overactive and won't let you, like, on one level you're like, no, I shouldn't do this doesn't feel right, but your mind, or pressure from somebody else, perhaps externally, overrides that. That can be a real problem, because now you're not operating in your authority, which is your gut. You're operating in the mind, and when you're in the mind, you can't make the right decisions. You can't make the decisions that are going to create flow. Now, you may happen upon them. Even a blind squirrel finds an acorn once in a while, right? But you want to be able to do this consistently. The goal is to consistently be able to operate in flow. And are you going to make mistakes? Absolutely. That's why we're here on this earth. We're not perfect beings. We're never going to be. But so, again, this is where a possible solution to that, or at least a way of mitigating it, is to maintain some sort of a recording, whether it's a journal or a voice memo or whatever the case is, to record your gut responses to these decisions, and then see how they play out over time. That can help the monkey mind, the rational mind that says, I need proof of this pattern. I need proof. Because here's the thing. You do something and it works out, and of course it was always going to work out anyway. You forget about the birthing process, right? It's like, oh, the baby's so great, so beautiful. You forget about all the struggle that you went through to get there. And so sometimes we can forget that when we make our gut decisions, those are the most powerful decisions. So yeah, by doing these things, I think this is where you'll find greater alignment and clarity in navigating life. So I'm going to stop there for a second and take a breath and a sip of coffee. But
Yeah.
thoughts? I mean, how does that land? Can you think of times where you've both operated in flow and out of flow? So sort of according to your gut versus your head? What have you
Yes.
noticed?
Absolutely. I think it's interesting because I think one of the hardest things is almost like the justification of choices and decisions, because we live in such a rational, reasonable, logic-based, mind-based world, right? That it is, well, you can't make decisions based on, I don't know, it feels right. And it feels like when I want to make a decision based on that, it's like, okay, well, that's not a good reason to do something, but it's like, no, it actually is, because that's you being in your authority. It's actually that deep resonance, that deep truth that is coming through there. And I think part of that is, you know, the external societal kind of upbringing and conditioning to not trust that gut instinct, because it's like, well, you need reasons to do things. But then there is also this like, oh, well, how do I justify it to other people, right? Like with, I'll use it because it's the most recent pressing thing on my mind, but this idea of moving. Like when I told all my friends I was moving back to Dallas, it's like, well, why? Why? What, what's going on? What motivated that? And I was like, I got the clarity and I decided to do it. And it's like, well, what about your lease? What about school? What about this? And I was like, well, I'll figure it out. You just, I don't know. I'll email my landlord. Well, but you committed to a year. Well, and what about this other thing too? Well, I could figure that out too, but I have this direction, and so it's like this, there is this pressure to make it all make sense when it's like, but the thing that makes the most sense is just to tap into that truth. And so I think a lot of my journey with like knowing thyself has been not just getting in touch with feeling those gut feelings, because I think that's a big difficulty point, at least for me a long time ago, was like, well, what does my gut even want to say? What does my gut even actually feel? And it's like, now that I can feel that a little bit more, trusting it and not having to justify it, right? And it's like, oh, I can totally feel my gut. Okay, now that's what I need to make decisions based on, which is still difficult to do because of this, whatever it is, need to prove or justify. And I think I really like this idea of having some sort of journal or record of like, okay, this is a decision I'm making totally based in my gut. Let's track it and see how it goes, to be able to kind of quiet down the like, you have no good reason to do this. And it's like, well, actually, it's been proven that this system works for me, that it does all of these things. The other thing I'll say too is the idea of meaningful work. That has always been such a common thread for me and is something that's so difficult, because I think that's like the biggest piece. It's interesting when so much of the population is a generator, and yet I feel so different to so many people. And I think a lot of the times people in spaces that I've heard people talk about human design, it's like, oh, well, that's why we have this society that's like, most people want to work and we want to move and we value hard work, is because most of the population are generators who like working hard and value hard work in this flow of energy. And I absolutely do value hard work and this forward movement, and I feel good after a day of hard work. But the thing that is the key for me with all of that is that it has to be meaningful. If I am pushing at something that I am like, but what am I doing? It just, nothing is more frustrating to me, because it's like, I'm wasting everything. I'm wasting my life. I'm wasting my time. I'm wasting my energy. And from the jump, like, I've never had a normal job. I've never had a normal interview, because it's like, I just can't imagine moving forward using my energy on something that doesn't resonate, that doesn't feel like it is making an impact. And like you said, there are things you always have to do, right? It's like there's parts of every job that you don't want to do. And it's like, audio mixing a podcast is not my favorite part about podcasting, right? It's like my favorite part is having meaningful conversations. But even in doing those other things, it's like, it's so less frustrating to audio mix a podcast when I just finished recording something that like super filled me up. So that is just absolutely something that has always rung so true for me. It just makes so much sense, and is a piece of this gut feeling that it's like a lot of these gut feelings I've been able to suppress, and a lot of my work has been about unsuppressing and then trusting. But that's been a piece that it's like I couldn't suppress the desire for meaningful work if I tried. That it just has always been such a driving force. So yeah, this absolutely resonates. And then the idea of like work hard and go to bed. It's like I don't want a job that feels like a job, and this idea of work-life balance, it's like I don't need work-life balance because I want my life to be meaningful and the work that I do to be what I want to be spending my life doing. It's like I want the things that I enjoy to also be my work because my work is the thing that I enjoy with Cohere. And so it's like I don't want my work and life to be two different things. I want them to be the same thing. And the thing that fills me up is also the thing that I put energy towards. So yes on all of that.
Well, and it's so great, the nice thing I think is you have done a lot of work on yourself over the years. So you're not coming at this as somebody who's really never so a lot of the sort of not self behaviors, you at least noticed. I'm not saying you've worked through all of them. I mean, and that's
Certainly.
part of the journey, right? But just the very fact, I mean, I would say for a lot of people who are sacral, so have a sacral, defined sacral center where the sort of the seat of their decisions. When you're operating in mind, and I just speak for myself here because I also, I have a defined sacral. And so when you can't feel that because you've ignored your body somatically for so long, it is kind of like flying blind. Like
Yeah.
you're not getting any, you're, if you think about a plane, right, we're trying to use our mind, as like our eyes, if you will, so there's in aviation, and I'm not a big aviation buff by any stretch, but I know you can either be cleared for visual flying where you can see things, but then there's a level beyond that, which is pure instrumentation flying. So you could be in a blacked out, without being able to see anything, and yet you should still be able to fly the plane. Well, for beings, well, really for everyone, but certainly for beings who have a defined sacral, which is going to tell them that gut feeling of yes or no, when they can't feel that gut feeling because their body, they've been conditioned by life, by their parents, by the world, by everything else, to are abused to the point where it doesn't feel safe in their body. How can you, if you don't feel safe, in your body, if closing your eyes doesn't feel safe, how can you trust that response that comes from your body? You
Yeah.
can't. But that basically means you're flying you're flying blind because your mind can't make these decisions, and your instruments aren't working. So now,
Right.
good luck. You can't see out the window, and you have no idea how fast you're going, how high off the ground you are. What's going to happen? Well, 99 out of 100 times you're going to crash that plane. And
Yeah.
so it can be very important, particularly for listeners who maybe who do struggle with somatic issues, if you to really get back into feeling into your body, because you need to make these decisions, especially if you're a sacral, you have a defined sacral, you're an emotional being, or a sacral being. You need to be able to feel into your body to make the decisions that are right for you. So well said. The second key thing, really, in terms of human design is the profile. So there are 12 distinct profiles. Again, won't get into the backstory of how you come up with them and what all of the different ones mean. But they're given by two numbers, and so you are what's known as a 5-1, which is a heretic investigator. Is what that particular combination is called. There are 12 combinations, and again, there is no good or bad. It's not being this is better or worse than this one. And humans, we have a tendency to want to constantly feel this is better or worse. It's not. There's no there's really nothing more than it is what it is, and
Right.
learn how to live this way. So the 5-1 profile it really has sort of a dual nature. It's this magnetic attraction, but also periods of necessary retreat. But the 5 line and the 2 line, but you don't have a 2 line, but the 5 line and the 2 line are projection lines. And so people will project things on you all the time. And here's so there's two numbers, right? So there's the 5 and then there's the 1. So the first number, the 5, the heretic as it's called, that is your personality. So in other words, you know about this. This is something that is evident to you. You walk in this typically. You see this about yourself. It's part of your personality. The second number, the 1, is actually part of your design, which you may not know. It's you can think of that as sort of your unconscious. It's what you were designed to how you work best sort of in the subconscious. You may not be aware of this, but you may see it naturally play out in your life. So the conscious, so it's you could call it the personality or the conscious line 5 is the heretic archetype, which embodies qualities of rebellion, innovation, but more importantly, or as importantly, universalization. Line 5 individuals are associated with challenging norms, questioning authority, and pushing boundaries. And, I remember that story you had shared, I don't remember how long ago it was, but about a teacher who made a very derogatory comment about, I think it was, women are either, I don't remember exactly what it was, but they're either Madonnas or whore. I don't remember how the teacher said, but you pushed back against that. It's a very good example of your line 5 personality type coming out there, to be able to say, this is not, you push boundaries. You possess a natural ability to see beyond surface level appearances and really offer fresh perspectives that can shake up these existing systems. And so fundamentally, you are a visionary and a problem solver because you can see the bigger picture. And so roles that you may take on are that of leaders or trailblazers. And so you're naturally designed to attract followers and admirers. But again, you live within a projection field, and you need to know this and be aware of it. Because, for example, and I'm curious, maybe you ask your mother this, I don't know, but typically line 5 individuals, when they're born, their parents will project all of these hopes and dreams onto them, whether or not they realize it often, especially if they know nothing about human design, so haven't deconditioned. But this is just the perfect child. Look at how wonderful she is, how perfect she is. Like she's going to do great things. All of these, I see you laughing. Tell me what that's about.
So like we had talked about, I know a little bit about my human design, and mainly the generator and authority stuff is what I'd known a little bit about. And most of my questions were around this 5-1, because I'd heard rumblings and, things. And I'm like, I wonder what Dennis thinks about these things. I have never heard that before about my human design. And that is fascinating. I am the youngest of 2 children. And my older brother, I think I've probably shared this before in some way, but has a very specific mental health makeup and was, for all intents and purposes, a difficult child. I wouldn't say I was an easy child either, but he needed a lot from my parents for his upbringing and growth. And me, I think, being an empathetic person, had to learn at a very young age that his needs have to come first because they're so pressing. It's like you have 2 houses you're taking care of. If one of them's on fire, well, yeah, that house is going to be the one that gets the attention because you got to put the fire out, right? If the other house is like, oh, there's never a fire, it just goes perfectly, it's like, then it's the perfect house, right? There's no problems ever. We don't have to do anything, and it can just roll. But there was just the idea of even perfection is so interesting, because that word I've done a lot of work with. But the thing that specifically is really sticking out for me is I remember growing up, there's this weird pedestalization that comes up in my relationship with my dad a lot, where he would say, like, you this visionary kind of, who he's like, you're on the same level as these really big thinkers and amazing people that are going to change the world. And it's like, it feels really good to have someone see you in that way, but it's also all of this pressure that is like, and I'm only human. But it just, in all of these ways, it is very much like the perfect child, not in that you don't need anything, not in that you don't require anything, but perfect in the sense that, like, if you have this golden egg, it's like it requires other types of care because it's so perfect. There's other things we need to worry about here. Yeah, so that's just, I had never heard that piece of this puzzle before, and it just rings so true.
It's funny how that is. Yeah.
Yeah.
It is the biggest, it is the challenge of all line fives. In that there is this constant projection field. And if you're not aware of it, especially when people will project onto you that you're able to solve this for them, that you're going to be, it's almost a little bit of a savior thing, where, like, without really knowing you, they'll attribute things to you, say, oh, you can do this. But then when you don't live up to what they think you should be, they will vilify you.
Mm.
And it just comes with the territory of the line five. But the problem is if you try to meet their expectations, then you're not living your true life, because they're going to project things. You're living their life. You're living what they're seeing of you. Now, Here's the thing. If a lot of people start seeing the same thing on you, like keep projecting the same thing about you, that may be a call to look at it and say, okay, well, what are people, is this who I am? And really take a look at that when people project. If you're getting the same projection over and over again, why? Ask yourself that. How is this being projected? So you can always ask yourself that. But again, it is this unique challenge, because you have to both navigate what other people expect of you, while at the same time remaining authentic to yourself. And the more people know you, the more likely they are to project their own issues, their expectations onto you. And so this can particularly be I think can be jarring, because this can lead to feelings out of nowhere of vulnerability or insecurity, or even just being victimized. Like, the world is against me. Like, why do people turn on me? Like, why do they? And if you don't understand why, you can start thinking it's you. Like, oh my gosh, yeah. It's me. I'm broken. The last thing I'll say about the 5 portion, and again, you have to kind of take these both individually and together. So the 5-1, but you have, which is really cool, the highest universalizing power among the what they call the transpersonal profiles. What this means is you have an exceptional ability to take complex topics and make them relatable and understanding to a broad audience. And so it is not surprising that you have created Cohere and the collective, because that is literally what you were designed to do in some senses, to be there to shed light on problems or solutions, light on these problems and situations, so that you can offer solutions that are going to cater to the need of the collective. And that is so powerful, because you can know what you're building is what you should be building, because literally that is what you are designed to do as a 5 being your personality, your conscious, if you will, sort of line. Right. The 5 is paired with the 1. Now the 1 is known as the Investigator. And this is typically characterized by an insatiable curiosity and a drive for deep, deep understandings. Okay, so you are a natural researcher, for example. You will not feel secure. Now, you may not know this, because remember, this is the unconscious line. Okay, but I'm just curious to see if this is something you see in your behavior, even if you maybe haven't consciously brought it. But you likely need to establish very solid foundations on whatever it is you're going to do before you feel secure enough to move forward. So my guess is when you decide to move into a new area, you likely do a lot of research, whether that's listening to podcasts, watching other people, reading, whatever the case is, that is how you come to, that is how essentially you can get your gut to get that yes or no answer. You need, if you don't know something about, if you don't know enough, whatever that means and whatever the situation is for your subconscious, unconscious investigator profile, your gut is not going to feel comfortable making a decision. So the question then is when you don't feel something from your gut on a decision, you can ask yourself the question, do I know enough? And see what might be lacking. So you create your security. This energy, your investigator energy, is about creating security through understanding. So your goal is to, unconsciously, you want to be an expert. And you do this by researching. You do this by analyzing. You are not meant to wing it. You are not improv. Like you are there to build structure and security for yourself first. And in doing so, that will naturally attract and build that security for other people. So yeah, I'll stop there for a second. How does the investigator piece ring true? It sounded like the heretic, the projection field, all of that made a lot of sense. But how about the investigator? Is that something that does make sense?
Absolutely. And I think it's interesting. I didn't realize the 5 and the 1 were like conscious, subconscious. Because also I think this deep curiosity is something that I'm very aware about myself, that I have always had this like voracious desire for knowledge. And I do like being an expert in something. And that's actually where a lot of, I think, insecurity will come from in sharing knowledge or sharing my opinions, is like, do I know enough to be considered an expert? Do I consider myself an expert in these ways? And there are certain things that I'm certainly like, oh, I'm an expert in this. But it's like, am I enough of an expert to put my thoughts and opinions and suggestions out there? Because there is this desire to, like, if I am doing something, I want to understand it fully, like every single inch and nook and cranny that I could of this thing, not just to know it, but to be able to then share it with other people. And this is going to sound a little weird, but like, be the expert on that thing. It's like, there's no possible way that anyone else could know more than me about this one thing, because I am the expert on it. I have gotten every single possible piece of information I can about this. And of course, that speaks to like some insecurity, as well as, an impractical desire. And I also have a deep respect for other people's knowledge and desire to want to partner with people to learn from them too in this way. But there is this kind of drive to, like I said, like this deep knowledge of self and this desire to know thyself. It's like, I want to be an expert on myself. I want to fully understand all of who I am. That way, when I move forward, I am the expert on myself. I'm not in the dark about anything about myself. Even as I continue to grow and change and evolve, I want to know and understand and learn all of these different layers that unfold. And I do think that it's interesting with this combination of like the sacral being my authority and needing to trust the gut, but also wanting some of this justification from the mind. It's like, oh, you really can trust your gut when you know enough. And so it's like, there is this communication piece there that I think is really important, because there are times that it's like, I don't trust my gut on this one. Why is that? Well, I need to gain more information. Like there is some scientific inquiry that we need to take into the field on this. And the other thing I wanted to mention on the line 5, just real quick while we're talking about it, is this idea that the more people know you, the more they project on you. That is so fascinating to me as well, because I'm deeply someone who, like, I really don't care what strangers think about me, because it's like, you're a stranger. Like, you don't know anything about me. And if I'm in a grocery store by myself, like, I'll dance in the aisles, I'll be embarrassing, I'll whatever. I don't care because you don't know me. I get much more anxious and nervous about how I'm perceived by people who know me really well. And I've actually had a lot in my life of these journeys of like, I'll get extremely, extremely close to someone, and then the relationship kind of crumbles, and I can't really put my finger on why. And it's like, I thought that we had this like deep understanding of one another, and now we've been like best friends for 3 years, and then this one thing happens that's like, what just happened? And I think that it was just absolutely something you really spoke to, that when they project something onto you and you fail, then you're vilified. And it's like, I didn't
That can be
realize
super, super painful. And
it.
it's
Yeah.
probably something you may have experienced throughout your life, maybe in little micro ways too. Like, it's not necessarily, I mean, because it's happening all the time, because
Yeah.
this energy, it is you. I mean, essentially, this is your energy in a flesh suit. Like, this is the operating manual. Like, this can't help but happen. There's nothing you can do to
Right.
stop it from happening, any more than I can change my internal combustion engine in my truck to be an electric engine. Like, it doesn't work that way. It's a different engine. It runs on a different fuel. It's not diesel. It's not electric. It's gasoline.
Yeah.
So this is so for you. It's about understanding, and
Yeah.
then and not taking it on yourself as guilt or shame,
Yeah.
or because there's going to be a part of you that is there's probably a part of you that's protected itself. Like, there's probably hurt parts of you that have had this projection put upon you. You mentioned good friends who all of a sudden one thing and boom, the friendship ends. That part there, and that maybe that's a recurring event, things that have happened. That part of you is very tender, so you'll build walls around that. To, there'll be parts of you that are there to never again. I'm not going to let my. But however, I would encourage you to seek, to sit with those parts, because your purpose is the 5-1. You carry a very powerful transpersonal purpose, unlike some other line. So for me personally, I'm a 2-5. I do not have the same transpersonal purpose that you do. In that, I mean, yes, I am here to impact people, but maybe not as many or as universally as you are. You are designed to impact many people and make significant contributions to society. Whereas, for instance, my profile is more individualistic, yours is more collectivistic. It's just how we're designed, and we need both.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
everything is a contribution to the collective.
Right.
But again, that's why when you and I link up, there's a tremendous power there, because we're able to synergize things, and then you're able through your talents and your energy to bring that to people, and I'm able to strengthen areas that you have that you have less authority,
Right.
are not designed for, and in together, that energy, we amplify it, and it creates a wonderful thing. So again, you are a natural problem solver, but here's the thing: you can't fulfill your purpose alone either, which, unlike I can likely fill my purpose alone, because it is more individualistic as my particular profile. But what this means is even simple connections can really change your direction or path very quickly, um, because of the interconnected nature of your journey. And so you most likely have a much more conscious awareness of other people in the world than other necessarily types do. So what are the challenges? Because obviously, with everything, there's challenges that come with it, and a lot of it is awareness. But we've already talked about the constant projections from others. This can place, and probably has placed, immense pressure on your psyche, on yourself in the past, especially when these expectations do not align to who you are. That's where you're going to feel that push pull, and really burnout, dissatisfaction, frustration, and feeling trapped, because now you're put in a role that you didn't choose to be. And again, people are going to form strong opinions about you, and me, because I'm a subconscious line. I'm a 2-5, so I have the same 5 that you have, but it's more unconscious. It's not as much to the surface. I'm not conscious of it as much. And again, people form opinions about you before they know you, and that gives both unrealistic positive expectations. So they put you on a pedestal, but then they knock you off that pedestal, and it hurts. That fall can hurt. So how do you fix that? Well, I mean, it's always there, but one way to manage it is by setting clear boundaries and communicating very, very clearly and transparently to help manage these dynamics. What's another thing is perfectionism is probably something that may be something you should be on the watch for, because this line one energy can create a perfectionist trap, if you will, where either you feel you need more qualifications, you need more knowledge, you need more before you feel ready to share or lead, and this may or may not be correct, but it can delay your impact unnecessarily. And so you have to look at this fear of not knowing enough or not being prepared, because that can prevent you from stepping into your natural leadership role. And ultimately, it's pulling you away from your purpose, which is to help the community. Again, it goes back to community. And when you can almost think of it, I would say as being silent is in a cell. Allowing yourself to over research beyond the point where your gut says, no, I really have this, but your mind is pulling you to know just a little bit more, and you'll know when that click is. I can't describe it to you, but you'll know when it is, when you're ready to go out there. That's where you have to make sure your mind isn't trying to trap you in a perfectionism, in this, that you need more qualifications, or that you're an imposter. And so it's just, again, it's something to be aware of. And then, of course, in relationships, this can be very, very challenging, because partners will place unrealistic expectations upon you. And this can get exhausting. Additionally, you do need some solitude in order to balance that investigative nature. You need time to be able to do your research, if you will, to look things up. And that's not necessarily a communal process. That can be a very individualistic, I need to just dive into this, put on the headphones, stay away from me. And people take meaning out of that if they don't know who you are and you haven't explained, if you don't know yourself, you can't tell them, listen, this is how I operate. If this needs to be okay with you. If it's not okay with you, I can't change. I don't want to change because it is my design. So for me to change for you would be not living authentically in the most smooth way, and it's not going to work anyway. So
right.
That so that can be very important. The other thing is this. The line 5 is called the heretic, which is a very charged word, right? Heretics get burned at the stake, and so the challenge here is that this energy can often be, and I'm sure you felt it, misunderstood, and you might be thought of as difficult. Oh, she's contrarian. She's difficult. When in reality, you're just seeing. And here's what to think when people project that onto you is the reality is you're perhaps seeing solutions that others haven't even recognized yet. They might not have even recognized the problem in some senses, and you're coming up with these solutions. And because you've done your research, because of the investigative side, it kind of gives you a benefit over, say, a 5-2 who doesn't have the investigative nature where they need to know everything. They're more relying on charisma to get their message out there, which is more. But you have the foundation of having done all this research. So when you've done your research, when you've investigated, that helps you, because then what you're trying to share with the community has stuff to back it up, has power behind it that other types don't have. And so, again, from a relational perspective, though, you're out of the box, if you will, or sort of being ahead of the curve in terms of solutions can create friction in relationships, particularly if people are insecure. If your partner, whether it's a business partnership or a romantic partnership or even a friendship, if they're insecure, that innovative thinking might not be appreciated or understood. Let's see what else. Yeah, I think I'll I'll stop there. I mean, in terms of that, we got a little bit. There's one other broad area I want to get to, which is your
Yeah.
centers and stuff. So, but before I do, I don't know, how does all of that land? I mean, in terms of, does it make sense? Does it feel right? Is there anything that's like, it doesn't I don't quite get that. Like how?
Yeah. I think it all does very much make sense. And I think this, like, one, the universal kind of meaning is absolutely something that I feel. There is something about like the bigger picture that is so important to me, and both understanding like the depths and the core of the bigger picture to be able to kind of bring it on a really broad scale, really, really resonates with like this soul purpose kind of mission. I think one thing that is difficult in understanding, which it's like I can kind of justify and understand it in my own head, how I do think I am a heretic, and I kind of rebel in certain ways, like certainly against this like 9 to 5, you get married and you have kids, American dream
Right.
kind of thing. Like those ideas, I certainly I don't think I'm not quiet in my criticisms of the ways in which that can be really harmful to individuals and society. But I think the idea of like being rebellious is not something that I don't think people would look at me and be like, oh yeah, she's a rebel. Like that's not an energy that I think I bring. However, I do think that I am deeply critical of the status quo, but I try but it's almost like because of this projection aspect of like, oh, but we see like there's some sort of like weird idealization that it's like makes me likable in this other way, that it's like I don't know, it's also almost being like a very capable person. It's hard with this projection where it's like so often you can meet people's expectations, and it's like if someone projects all of these expectations onto you, and it's like, and I meet it and meet it and meet it and meet it because you get really good at meeting people's expectations and performing in these certain ways.
And we develop this belief of the way to succeed or the way to be valued is to meet expectations, right? We
Right.
have this deep-seated belief that what makes me good enough is meeting expectations.
Right.
And then all of a sudden now that becomes compulsive behavior, which is the not self. You're not operating
Yeah.
out of your power or your authority. You're operating, you're giving your power away. You're giving your power away to
Right.
these other people.
Well, and I think what happens is then like there is this sense of like me stepping back into the self feels like a betrayal to these other people, because it's like, hang on, I've seen you as this one thing, right? You've been meeting these certain expectations. It's almost like the thing that you hear where it's like the people who are mad at you when you set boundaries were the ones who were taking advantage of your lack of boundaries. And it's kind of that same thing where it's like, yeah, I've been outside of my authority in the not self for you meeting these expectations. I'm going to step back into this. And I think with people who have been disappointed by that in the past, it feels like a betrayal to them because it feels like I've changed, even though for me, it feels like stepping into my truth. And then there's this deep hurt on both sides. It's like, you've radically changed. And for me, I'm like, you're not accepting my truth. And so there is this weird, like, I get it, I get why that feels like a betrayal to these people. And the responsibility is on me to be in my authenticity and truth. And then whatever projections come from there, you deal with. But there is the responsibility on me to, like you said, be really clear up front that it's like, I need time alone. This is how I operate. These are the things that I need. And I definitely do need time alone. And I think the perfectionism thing as well with like, needing to have enough knowledge to feel like I'm justified in sharing something. It's a constant back and forth in my head of like, well, of course I want to always be learning and growing, and I don't ever want to get complacent in my curiosity and expansion and growth. But at the same time, at what point are you good enough? Are you worthy to be able to be this leader, this visionary, right? And it's also interesting, the whole burned at the stake thing, because I definitely have an affinity for like Joan of Arc archetype that's like, yeah, I'll die for what I believe in. You know, it's something that like the this martyr mentality is something that my therapist is like, okay, but also you don't have to be a martyr. Your ideas can be accepted. Is this interesting thing, but this expectation sometimes that like, but I'm probably gonna be burned at the stake for this one, you know, and just not knowing which ones are gonna land, and you just don't always know.
It's so true. For the projections, yeah, the most important thing is communication. It is it is regularly setting and communicating clear boundaries. Whether it's this is what I can't do this, I can't commit to what you're asking me to do. I can't necessarily get this done in time, or I can't necessarily show up to this thing next week. And it's just being very clear about it. If I'm able to, I will, but I'm setting expectations. And same with this fear of disappointing others. This idea, and again, it's about cultivating transparency. So and I think a great example of you doing this might have been last week when we first started talking about my chart, where it's like, hey, I'm not a professional. Like I'm not. That is setting expectations, right? That is openly expressing we're exploring this. I'm. It's something I love doing. I enjoy reading this, but you're also setting expectations. You're not solving a problem. We're exploring. And that
Right.
can be very important too. And for yourself as well, to understand that I can't necessarily provide answers. Like you're not
Yeah.
here to provide answers all the time. Now you are going to provide answers because that's your design, and they'll come up. But you don't have to work to provide. I mean, you will naturally provide those answers
Yeah.
because you're solving them for yourself as well. You're seeing things that the
Right.
community doesn't see, and so sometimes being ahead of the curve, is tough. It's
Well,
tough
it's
to
like
see things
the poet
before
is
the
always
need.
ahead of their time, right? Like you're either a madman or a poet thing.
Exactly.
Which I also
Exactly.
I don't want to like hype myself up in that way. It feels weird to even say that, but it's like that is how it feels sometimes, right? It's like,
It does, and doesn't
yeah.
surprise me at all because it would surprise me if it didn't feel that way because literally
Yeah.
that's the energy. That's why I love human design so much because it really does flow.
Yeah.
So the last thing, and we've got about, I don't know, 15 or so minutes left, I guess, and I did want to just touch briefly on your defined and undefined centers, because particularly I think the undefined centers are useful to know that they're undefined and what that means. So just as a brief introduction to energy centers. So every human design chart has 9 energy centers, and you can kind of think of these in some ways as like chakras. They influence significant life themes, emotions, instincts, pressures, communication. And so there's it's binary. Either you're defined or you're not defined in each of these 9 centers. So it's either on or off. You can think of it like a light switch. There's 9 light switches. Some are on or some are off. Now, the one thing I'll say is there's no good or bad here. So being defined versus undefined is not necessarily a good or a bad thing. People want to, people want to be defined. It's this. There's a natural tendency to want to be defined everywhere because it's more comfortable in some ways, because you're conscious of it. Um, and it feels good to have that certainty. But there are benefits to being undefined as well because it allows you to take in the experiences of other people when you know you're undefined in these areas. So you have, let's see. So you have 6 defined centers and 3 undefined or open centers, if you will. So we'll talk briefly about the defined centers, but I think the open ones are where it can be a little bit more interesting, frankly. You have a defined head center, which is represented on your chart by the triangle on the top of the chart. Um, and what, again, not to go into too many details because there's always more rabbit holes, but what you become defined when there's a connection between 2 centers. So each of the center, you can kind of think of it like what is that when you were a kid where you, wow, it's really eluding me, where you had numbers, connect the dots, okay?
Oh, sure,
Where
sure,
like
sure.
so you can only connect, like, centers have certain connections. You can almost think of like Risk, like the board game Risk, where you can only get to Kamchatka if you're here or here, you know, like you have borders. So each of these centers kind of has borders. And if two borders touch and they're both activated, then both of those become defined, essentially. What that really means is you have conscious knowledge of this. You have a it's a consistent strength versus an area of sensitivity is how I would put it. So your head center, you consistently have clarity of thought and a structured, reliable mental processing ability. What this means, this just really allows you to manage intellectual attacks effectively. It also means a defined head is interesting because it does allow you to come up with novel ideas. So in general, folks who have a defined head can come up with new things. So purely new ideas. Only about 30% of the population, give or take, has a defined head center, and you are designed to be an innovator in that sense, sort of a creator in the sense of coming up with novel ideas out of nowhere. An undefined head would be much more about synthesizing existing ideas. So it's not that one's better than the other. It's not better that you have a defined head or worse that you have a defined head, but it does. It's something you can be confident in. You can come up with a consistent, sort of clear, logical thinking process. And this comes in the investigator side too, right? You probably have a process by which you do your research. It's not, I'm just going to Google this. You may have a very defined sort of structured, maybe it's lists. I don't, how you operate, but there's a very defined process that you likely have. The second center is directly below the head. You can kind of think of it as the sort of the mind. It's called the Anja center. So the head center is sort of the center of inspiration and thinking, whereas the Anja center is about conceptualization and analysis. And again, so having a defined center, you consistently have these precise analytical skills and generally a structured thought process. So again, this is wonderful because it helps you synthesize complex information very clearly. This makes you a very good problem solver. It makes you a very good your execution is on point because you're able to do things like, I'm not saying you enjoy every aspect of it. You mentioned, it's not, audio mixing isn't necessarily the fun piece, but you have a process. And you were able to create this process, and this process works for you. When things come up, you're able to overcome that because it's like, okay, I'll pivot because of this defined Anja center, Ajna center. The throat center, that's the next one below on the chain. And the throat center is really the center of manifestation in some senses, not in the, manifestation community kind of thing, but in the idea literally of expressing things. It's your voice, it's your throat, it's how you express. And again, your throat center is defined. So you have a dependable and articulate voice to express yourself and your ideas clearly. And so again, being a podcast, I mean, it's very evident just from the fact that we're sitting here. Would be shocking to me if you didn't have a defined throat. Although again, it could play. I mean, again, there's interactions because I also have a defined throat. So it could be that, hey, when you're with even somebody without a defined throat could still be a podcaster. It doesn't preclude anything. It's just, but it would be more difficult on their own. They probably wouldn't do it on their own. They may be a guest sort of thing. The fourth is known as the G center, which is really the center of identity and direction. And again, you have a defined G center, so you have a strong, stable sense of who you are, your identity, and a clear direction in your life. So you have a sense of purpose. I think you've talked about it in terms of making meaning. Like, it's very important. You know what you want to do. You may not know how you're going to get there. You may not know what the end result's going to look like, but you know your purpose and you're aligned with that purpose and you know who you are. And now you know a little bit more about who you are, but this is defined. So it can be very disconcerting to have an undefined G center because it really does lead you to constantly ask, who am I? Who am I? Your sacral center, again, this is the powerhouse of all of the centers. It is the most energetic. It has the most energy. It is about energy and vitality. And once again, this is defined for you. So you have abundant physical energy, and you have a very strong, reliable gut level responses to guide your decisions. And again, you know, when you're operating in self, you're going to be operating and making those decisions accordingly to your gut responses. You will be listening to that. It's defined. You can trust it. It's there for you. You will reliably always have energy. Other types have to worry more about, if you have an undefined sacral, you may have to worry more about energy, because you have to watch your energy very carefully, or you can become very depleted. Generally, generators, I mean, of course we can become depleted, but it's normally not about doing so much. It's because we're doing the wrong things. We're not
Right.
we're doing back. We're not living authentically to who we are. Is
Sure.
when we find ourselves depleted. The last defined center is the root center, and again, a lot of these roughly align with chakras for the most part, I think. And the root center is the center of pressure and stress. Again, you consistently have the capability to manage pressure and utilize your adrenaline, utilize your system constructively. And so you probably excel at managing stress. And so you can turn pressure into productive energy rather than anxiety. And again, not that these are universally true, but these are your 6 defined centers. Next, we'll talk a little bit about the open or undefined centers, which are the spleen, the solar plexus, and the heart, or ego center, as it's called. Those 3 are undefined for you. But before we do that, just any thoughts on, did anything resonate particular? Anything show up for you in the defined centers?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. This strong sense of identity and purpose always, I mean, that's the core of my work. And so it always feels really true when I hear things like that. And anytime it's like, you may struggle to really know what you were put here to do, I'm like, that's off base. I have this strong sense of exactly what I want to be chasing. So that always feels really on point to get that confirmation, validation there. I think also the ability to use stress to like push you forward is really interesting, because I think that is something that, like, finding a healthy way to do that has been a really interesting growth point for me, because I think in high school, when it was like I was getting maybe 5 hours of sleep a night and just doing as many possible things as I could, and was extremely stressed out and overwhelmed every single day, but I absolutely used that to, like, just keep running and just keep going and just keep pushing as a way to kind of channel it. And I could absolutely do that, but it wasn't in a very healthy way. And now trying to figure, like, that's very much a growth edge for me right now, is trying to figure out a way to use this, like, energy that stress and overwhelm can bring up in a productive way without trying to, push it down and not feel it, but also not like, that means I need to be absolutely still. It's like, you can still take action and move forward in a way that isn't ignoring the stress too. So that's helpful.
Nice, yeah. So I have an undefined root center, and yeah, and one of the things, I'm actually a growth edge for me, and in my own personal therapeutic work, is there's always a constant nagging sense of something's right around the corner for me. And like and not even other people's expectations, but it's almost my own expectations of myself. I'm putting stress on myself I'm often operating in not self, trying to push myself to meet self-imposed deadlines that maybe I shouldn't. And that stress and that affects me. Whereas for you, because your root is defined, you are better able and better equipped. It is your natural way of being able to handle that sort of stress, which is a real positive. Again, there's benefits and there's a yin and a yang, right? But
Right, of course.
cool. So you have 3 open or undefined centers, and again, this what does it mean again to be open? Is that an open area? You can kind of think of it as like a undeveloped film, right? So when things pass through it, or an X-ray or something, you are open you are sensitive, you are receptive, and you are also potentially vulnerable to other people's energy, particularly in these three areas, because your energy is open here. And so you are going to absorb and amplify. So here's the thing, it's not just you take on other people, you actually amplify it. And it can cause, particularly in like a relationship, whether it's a parent child relationship. I think a great example of this amplification would be, well, we'll talk about when we get there. But just that's the key thing to remember here is amplification. Like,
Okay.
you in these three areas, you are going to pick up from other people, depending on how they are defined, and particularly if they have a defined center here, the effect could be even stronger. So the first is your spleen center, which is all about your intuition and your health. And so this openness means you easily absorb and amplify the well-being and the intuition, the intuitive feelings of other people, more so perhaps than your own. And so there's some strengths here. You likely have a heightened empathy and sensitivity to others' well-being, particularly from a physical health perspective. So this is really the seat of health, both physically and mentally. But you likely have this heightened empathy and sensitivity to others' well-being. And what's great here is this gives you the ability to adapt and respond very compassionately when other people are struggling, particularly with physical health and other issues. But it gives you this strong ability to to empathize, essentially, to adapt and to respond. However, there's also challenges here. Number one is in your own life, potentially having anxiety or insecurity about your own health. So worrying about health more than, say, other people do. Always constantly wondering, am I okay? Constantly. So health. It doesn't mean that you're more likely to be unhealthy or anything else, but it is something that you have to watch out for, that you could focus, that there could be a focus there. Secondly, you can have a difficult time discerning your intuitive signals from other people, particularly when you're around people with defined spleens. So you may be picking up their energy, and so it can be very difficult. And a question you can ask yourself is this mine? Does this belong to me, or am I taking on somebody else's, and being aware of it? Because it's gonna happen. You're going to feel it. You need to make sure that it's your concern and not that you're not being influenced externally. So when you are in an emotionally charged environment, or particularly around health, it's just something to be aware of. So what are the possible pitfalls? Again, being anxious. Just as an example, if your mom is undergoing a health issue, okay, whatever it is, something's not quite right. It's very possible that you may have anxiety because you have this. You're over-identifying. You're really taking on, in a sense, like your mother in this case is either perhaps even her fears. Maybe you're not even scared of it, but she is very scared of it. You may still take some of that on, because that's just the way you're designed to do so. And so what do? I mean, when that happens, again, grounding. In this case, grounding techniques are very powerful and very important to be mindful, to, again, remember your own intuitive signals. Are you actually worried about this? Or are you absorbing your mother's concern? Well, and this could be about your own health too. Like, you need to make sure that it's coming from you and not from other people. So that's the spleen. The second one is the solar plexus, and this is the center of emotions and feelings. And you are not an emotional being. In terms of that's not to say you don't have emotions or anything like that.
Right.
But 49% of the population, roughly, is not emotional. 51% of the population is an emotional being. And being emotional or not is the very definition of being an emotional being is having a defined solar plexus center. So based on the fact that your solar plexus is undefined means that you are not an emotional being in terms of human design. What what does this mean is it means you have an openness that allows you to easily absorb and amplify. And again, there's that word amplify, emotional energy around you. And so this is the classic example of amplification. You have a parent who is an unemotional being. So and again, unemotional sounds so stoic. That's not what it means. Again, it's about this center and what drives it. So you have a father, let's say, who's an unemotional being, and you have a child, maybe a son, who is an emotional being. And the violence can occur in those situations because the father amplifies, who has who does not have a defined solar plexus, so is unemotional, not only picks up the emotions, and this is all unconscious, picks up the emotions of the child, but amplifies those emotions. And so it can very easily lead to conflict. And so it's to notice how other people's emotions, again, could affect you, and noticing that issue. It's a great strength because you can be empathetic and really get what other people are feeling. You have that compassionate interaction because you're able to absorb their emotions, and so you can sense and understand these emotional undercurrents very, very deeply and profoundly, which I cannot, in a sense. I can understand my own deeply because I'm an emotional being, but it's much more difficult. I don't take on other people's emotions in the same way that you might. And again, we get the word empath thrown around, this, that, and the other thing. I don't, but certainly having an open solar plexus center means you're more apt to take on other people's emotional energy, essentially. And so, again, it's important for you to distinguish your personal emotions from those of others people that you've absorbed externally. Cultivating practices such as an emotional cleansing. Maybe it's a ritual. Maybe there's a regular, an LBPR or it's LBPR. I think I got that right. So it could be esoteric, but it could also be mindfulness. It can also be it doesn't necessarily. You have to find what works for you, but you need to be aware of that. And the last one, just because we do need to wrap up, but is your heart and ego center, which is around willpower and value. And so your openness here means you easily absorb and amplify others' sense of self-worth and ambition. Okay, and versus necessarily it being your own. Like and so what are the strengths of this? Well, number one, it means you're very adaptable and very responsive to sort of the environment. So varied desires. So in a team environment, you are paying attention to what everyone else, other people's perspectives. You're not locked in on your own. And in general, this open heart is lovely. It's beautiful because it means you have a humility, a genuine and authentic humility and openness to the needs of the collective, which people with a defined heart are much more egocentric. I have a defined heart. My focus is much more internal because of that defined heart. What are the challenges? Well, you may have a fluctuating self-worth, and it's very easy, again, this word overextending yourself, promising too much, doing too much. Secondly, because your heart is open, this ego center, this heart center is open, there is a tendency to rely and to seek external validation for things. And that's where you really need to watch out. You may feel a continual pressure to continually prove your worth. And and really you're only proving it to yourself, but you're trying to prove it to other people. But in reality, right. And part of it is driven by this open heart center. So what is something that might occur? What's a pitfall? Again, having burnout from overcommitting or from trying to seek something that you can't really get, which is external validation. Second, so what's the solution? Again, I find affirmations, reminding yourself of who you are, reminding yourself of your self-value independent of external achievements, that you are valuable for yourself. Just because of who you are. And then again, it is about consciously limiting commitments so that you have a sustainable energy level. So for example, one thing you may prompt yourself or something you might think about is thinking about a situation where either an emotional or a health related anxiety felt overwhelming to you. And were they external versus authentic internal concerns? So the next time you feel some sort of an anxiety, this fear of either an emotional perspective, health related, whatever the case is, it can be it can be an opportunity to stop and ask yourself, is this mine? Again, whose is this? Does this belong to me? And if the answer is no, can I let it go? Can I just let it vanish? And again, it's this discernment. So yeah, I think I'll stop there. I mean, again, there's another 18 pages that we could have gone through. Would love to talk about some of your gates and maybe we will offline, because I think there's a few more interesting things. But I don't know, before we wrap up, just thoughts on that last section in terms of defined versus particularly the undefined, because these are places where we're constantly conditioned into being our not self. Because this societal homogenization, this pressure to be like everyone else. I'm just curious, as we look to wrap up, was there anything there that was particularly powerful?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, the like, well, and you're not an emotional person. My gut instinct is like, whoa, I'm a deeply emotional like most people would say I'm like overly emotional actually. But then the redefining of like, oh, it's not emotional or unemotional. It's this other kind of dimension of like, is that a wellspring from within yourself, or do you soak it in kind of from other people? And that is just, yes, I have always been called an emotional sponge. And taking on even these anxieties about health and physical fitness too, I think that that's something that is not really a huge priority in and not that like my physical body isn't important to me. You know, your body's a temple, you take care of your body, but it's not a, like, I'm certainly not a gym rat, and I'm not that kind of idea with health has never been a piece of me, but it's very important to a lot of people in my family, and they have deep relationships with physical fitness and their diet. And so it's interesting to know that like some anxieties, especially around like body image and stuff, I think I do soak in from external messaging. And I like the way you framed it with these positives and negatives, but with the amplification too, that it's helpful to see the ways in which it's like it allows you to deeply connect with other people, and like this open heart center being something that allows you to really feel into all of these other people's needs and wants and desires, but to be super mindful about what your truth is too, and going back to that. So yeah, I would suppose just validating in a lot of those ways. And I think I didn't realize that the spleen center was so much about like physical health too. So that was super interesting and makes a lot of sense in terms of...
And physically, I think the spleen is about immune response. So it is literally like where, the spleen is important for immune response. I think maybe the T cell, I mean, there's stuff with like killer T cells and
sure.
Sort of release the hounds, sort of some of that comes from the spleen, from what I've watched Dr. House, I've watched House enough times to, I think, know that. But yeah, I think it's again, to me, it does come to be about noticing.
Yeah.
It's particularly to make sure you're not operating in not self, because your design is to be open, but also to be aware of your own truth. And one of the things you can watch out for from a splenic perspective is there is an insecurity in not having a defined spleen, particularly from a health perspective, but just in general, a secure perspective. And so if you have particularly for kids, and it's really much more relevant for kids, but can be relevant in relationships as well, particularly romantic relationships, you may find yourself very attracted to somebody with a defined spleen, because when you're together, your spleen becomes defined. And so if you do have health worries, if you have health insecurities, which can come up, being around somebody who doesn't have them can make you, it makes you defined in your spleen, and so it actually makes you feel better. That doesn't mean that the relationship is healthy or useful or serves a purpose, but it can be one of those things that you hang on to. And so it's just, it's always good to know thyself. Again, it's not necessarily to do anything with it, but just to reflect on it and do one exercise. Just notice it. Again, just notice it.
Yeah.
How is this impacting my life? How is this, is this causing frustration? Is this blocking flow? How do I feel about this? What thoughts come up? And, once you start to work with your design instead of against it, it becomes easier and easier and easier. And so, with that, I guess that's where we'll end. It's been a pleasure sharing this with you. Any last thoughts? I know this was a long one, so, but
yes,
good, really good.
Just absolutely. I mean, just so much value for me personally in both validation, but also ways to notice, right? And I think one thing about this that's been so helpful is like things that you think of as weaknesses that are actually your strengths, and even though, yes, like your greatest strength is often also your greatest weakness, a reminder that like the things that make you different, it's going to sound so trite, but truly are the ways in which you're meant to give back and are the ways that you're meant to make the communities around you better. And knowing that those desires are that feel so intrinsic to me are it's really, really powerful to have that confirmation, but then also just the reminder to keep trusting the self, that like even in liking the external validation of the human design, it's like, but remember, you don't need the external validation, right? It's like, even though human design is helpful in these ways, it's like, it is at the end of the day all about you and getting back in touch with that, the gut center, the sacral, the purpose in all those ways. So I have a lot that I'm going to, integrate and mull over, and I have plenty to further investigate. But thank you, Dennis, for the time that you took to look at this and present this. It's really been so lovely, and I'm so appreciative and grateful to you for doing this.
Well, I appreciate your bravery in hearing about yourself, and I encourage others, any listeners. I am happy to do this for folks. My website should be up, and again, it's I feel like from a coaching perspective, when as a coach, or therapist, if I understand your type, then I can be more effective as a coach and a therapist. So it's not to me, it's about leveraging this to understand how you work. And again, if I'm a mechanic, and I view a coach or a therapist as in some ways as a helper, right? I'm trying to not fix things because I don't think you're broken, but it's helpful to know the design if you're going to go try to change the oil. Like that's why we have instruction manuals. And so from a helping humanistic coach therapist perspective, to know who you are and how you work and to help you live more authentically in that, to me is a really powerful coaching tool, in addition to, it's not the only thing because, but it is I think it can make a huge difference. Hopefully, this has sparked some stuff, and listeners, I do encourage you, try it out. I dare you, and see if again, take the Pepsi challenge as they used to say back when I was really young. Anyway, thanks everyone. Thank you, Reese. It's been a pleasure, and can't wait for what's on deck.
Absolutely. We'll see y'all next time. Bow Down is a weekly podcast from the Cohere Collective that explores esoteric and empowered feminism.
Please subscribe to Bow Down wherever you may be listening. And if you enjoyed the episode, please leave us a like, a 5-star rating, and a review. And if there's anyone you think would enjoy this episode, or maybe just needs to hear it, please share it.
If you want to stay up to date on all things Bow Down, you can follow the Cohere Collective on any social media platform at the Cohere Collective, and check out other content and offerings at www.thecoherecollective.com.
If you're interested in working with Reese to find and pursue your purpose, I encourage you to head to www.thecoherecollective.com/life-coaching.
If you're interested in working with Dennis to shed your mask and embrace your desires, you can email Dennis at dennis@theheartstoybox.com.
A huge thank you to Jack Corbett for Bow Down's music. You can find him on Instagram at j.corbe. Thank you all for joining us today. We're so glad you're here.
And as always, we hope you feel like you are living more coherently. And until next time, love.